Hello, I'll try and unmute you.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Oh, good. No, okay, so good. We're both on video, which is good. I thought I had to do something else here. All right, so Dr. Corin, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How's things?
Good. I'm so excited to be chatting to you, and I'm so glad you agreed to discuss and to chat with me today. Because like I said to you, I've been following you for quite a long time. It's been almost 5 years. And so I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity right now. So I'm really happy about that.
I don't know about celebrity, but yeah, that's cool. It's nice to, yeah, with Instagram, it's always nice to connect with people, particularly people that follow us and that engage with us a lot, you know, and we've got a lot of people now that we know quite well through there.
Yeah, so I came across you. I was living in Dubai at the time, so I didn't know much. I didn't know anything about Maca, but my husband, I found some. Well, my husband worked as an airline pilot back then, and he was always recommended things for energy and fatigue, chronic fatigue especially. So I found some Maca powder in his pantry, and I said, "Oh, what's this?" He said, "Oh, it's really good stuff. It gives you a lot of energy." So I just tried it, and I thought, yeah, I didn't know much about it, and so I started looking into it, and I came across Seleno Health, and I just kept following you all these years and was fascinated with the work that you did with Indigenous people and really doing work on the ground. So I guess we can just start by, because are you originally Australian? You studied at Melbourne Uni, is that right?
Yeah, I was born in New Zealand, but I mean, I've spent most of my academic life in Australia. So I went to Melbourne to do my PhD, having done my undergrad and honours in New Zealand. And then I just basically from there went into research. So I postdoced in Sydney at the Heart Research Institute and worked there for many years, and then went into a bit of medical writing for Saatchi and Saatchi, and ended up in the pharmaceutical company based out of Sydney as a kind of a specialist in cardiometabolic health. So I think my last role was a medical liaison for a company called Sanofi, which was in obviously a global pharma company. So yeah, I mean, I'm born in New Zealand, but spent a lot of my life in Australia, particularly in the academic side of things in the industry over there. And that was where I thought my career was going to continue to go. And things took a very big turn when I went on a trip to Peru. And it was actually a trip to South America, just as a holiday for 3 months to, you know, to go and learn more about Latin culture and things.
So someone had other plans for you. The universe was directing you in a particular direction. So you obviously have a wealth of knowledge in medical treatment side of things and how things are treated in mainstream medical area. And now you're doing something, I guess, on the other side of that. Tell us a little bit more about your project in Peru and how you ended up staying there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm a scientist and I grew up and studied as a scientist, but on my own personal health journey, I've always had an interest in natural health. And that really came about in my early 20s when I had a lot of issues with chronic fatigue. And it's funny that you mentioned chronic fatigue earlier, because that was something that struck me down a lot. And, you know, like I was like other people, I went into Western health first and then found that when I couldn't get any solutions for my own health, that's when I started to venture beyond that. So I always like people to know that up front, that I'm not a scientist who was massively suddenly converted. It was, you know, it was my own experiences that kind of made me think and question myself as a scientist as to, like, do we really know all the answers? And is there a lot more that we need to know, or that we, you know, out there? So yeah, I went to Peru, and I ended up connecting over there and crossing paths with my wife now, Sally, and well, wife, and in 3 days we're getting married. So
Congratulations. Oh, you're getting married in 3 days.
yeah, so
Oh, not yet married. Okay.
yeah.
That's
So she's
exciting
my
for you.
fiance currently, but yeah,
Yeah.
soon to be wife. Yeah, and it was just really inspiring. So the first thing is, I mean, she grew up in Lima in the city there, and her family are from an agricultural background. So they came from the Andes down to the city in search of money, and you know, like a lot of the Andean people have done. They left their farms and they brought their kids to the city to try and give them a life with money, because obviously the farmers in Peru it's very sort of marginalized communities that they live in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she taught me a lot about her culture, and I was just inspired. I mean, she showed me the Andes, and she kept feeding me maca, and it was really funny because I was like you, I knew nothing about this plant, and I remember I'd wake up and in the morning I'd get a breakfast made for me with porridge with maca in it. I'm like, what's that flavor? She said, oh, it's macaroot. I said, okay, cool. And then, you know, it was in my teas, and then it was in my my soups and my stews. And I said, what are you feeding me? And she said, you need to eat maca. It's the food of your brain.
Wow.
And at the time, like, I'd opened up to her a lot about my health, and particularly mental health was something that was a big problem for me. I'd been on antidepressants for almost 7 years. And that I'd always struggled with that side of things since having had issues with chronic fatigue. So she saw that, you know, she wanted to help me with using the traditional plants that she knew were best for mental health, and that for her that was maca. And as a child, she was always told by her mum, like, you have to have your maca before school because it's for your brain. It's going to keep you smart, and it's going to help you be intelligent, and it's, you know, it's what your brain needs to thrive.
Wow. So it's something really widely used then in their culture, like on a daily thing.
Yeah, and in Andean culture, and this is what's interesting, is there's really a big disconnect in Peru now with the Lima being the West and the Andes being, you know, tradition.
Yes.
So even children who are first generation from the Andes who've come down to Lima, they don't know maca.
Wow.
So her family are very well, they may have heard of it, but they don't know it like their parents or their grandparents. And her family kept a lot of those traditions. So her journey was really, you know, reconnecting with those roots. And maca was incredible. Like, after about 4 to 6 weeks, I just noticed changes in my mood, changes in my mind. And I think, well, for me, like, what was really interesting is when I went on antidepressants, I remember before going on them, feeling like I was on a roller coaster that was out of control, where, you know, there were highs, there were lows. I didn't enjoy the ride. I wasn't having a good time. I just wanted to close my eyes. And when I went on the antidepressants, the roller coaster was over, but I felt very numb. I felt very disconnected to myself. I felt like there was no, the depression was gone, but a lot of the joy, a lot of the passion had gone with it. And for me, that was the first thing I noticed with maca, was I felt that little spark come back, that little spark of connection to myself and feeling more real and more in touch and in tune with my emotions.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that's what really inspired me, because I thought, what have I changed in the life? And obviously I was falling in love, so that helps. But, you know, looking beyond that, you know, there was something biochemically different in me. And and I said, and Sally said, it's the maca. I've been feeding you maca for 4 weeks, and it takes about 4 weeks to start working. So that whole journey was just so inspirational, and learning about their culture and the way they view health, the holistic approach, some of the cosmovision from the Andean community and their philosophies was just inspiring. So I went back to Australia. Sally came out to visit me while I was back at work, and it didn't take me long to think I need to go to Peru.
Go back. So it called you back.
And so I quit my job, and everyone thought I'd gone insane. And then I moved to Peru, and I never looked back, really. So Korea had, you know, like, that was 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah, that tends to happen when you connect to you connect to a land and a people, it sort of just calls you back, doesn't it? It calls you back to something that you've connected to, and you seem to not be able to stay away then. So that's obviously a calling. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your project there, what you're involved in?
Yeah. So the first thing I did was I said, like, I'm intrigued by this plant. It fascinates me. Like, I want to learn more about it because it's not something that we've seen much in the West. And I'd heard of, this whole superfood fad, but I said there must be more to it. So it was, we went to a community where we connected with this incredible farmer who had been farming maca for generations and had amazing knowledge. So this was all through Sally's connections. And we just spent time with them on their farm, learning about what they do, their lives, how they connect with the plant, how they cultivate maca. And they were very traditional farms. So they're very much involved in the spiritual side of it as well. And the Andean cosmovision, where it's not just a plant or a crop to grow for sale. It's, they have their ceremonies before they plant and harvest.
Right.
They follow the energetics of maca and the way they plant, rotate their crops, the way they harvest, the way they traditionally would sun dry it. And like all of those traditions that have been passed down through generations, that was part of the way that they farmed. And that was quite rare in Peru because the commercialization of maca, everything is becoming about industrial scale, speed,
Yes.
production. It's a commodity. So yeah, it was amazing. So I learned so much there, and I just said, this is fascinating. I want to understand more about this plant. So I contacted my colleagues back in New Zealand who I'd studied with originally, because I know one of them at Victoria University in Wellington was an amazing natural product chemist. And I said, like, these guys, their projects are all about like fingerprinting plants and extracts and figuring out what's in it and figuring out what's going on and understanding the biochemistry of what we're looking at. And I said, that's where I want to take this, because there's some unique things that these people are doing that don't make any sense from a Western point of view, but there's got to be some science in it. So I'll give you one quick example. They take this it's a radish, it's a high altitude radish, and they take it out the soil, and unlike us where we would cut it and eat it fresh in a salad, they put it under the sun next to a mountain for 3 months, and they turn it every day until it shrinks into a little rock hard pellet. When it's like a rock, so they tap it and it's incredibly hard, then they say it's medicinal, and now we can boil it to extract it.
Wow.
And I was like, well, this is science. You guys are biochemists. There's something happening in this plant. So it was basically like looking at those processes and understanding it and figuring out what's going on and how we can make sense of the traditional use of this crop that's been used for 2,000 years and what it does in the body and why it helped me with my mental health and my energy.
That is so fascinating. So that's really using the energy of the whole spectrum, like the energy of everything, the sun and the environment. And as humans, we connect to the place that we live in. So it's going to have even more medicinal properties. Like that is really, really fascinating. So then you took the product and you started researching. Is that what you did?
Yeah, it was so there were two things that we wanted to do. So for Sally, it was about really connecting with the farm, empowering the farmer, creating products with him, and then establishing a way to get those products directly to a market that were interested, being New Zealand and Australia. And so that was her role. And then also working with the community to put money back into community projects so that we could kind of help support the communities as well as the farmers. And also a big part of it was cultural preservation, because she had lost a lot of her culture through this Western change. And she said, these kids, they're not doing their ceremonies, they're not wearing their costumes anymore. They're not, they don't understand the importance of maca. They don't understand the cosmovision, the energetics. They don't speak Quechua anymore. So a big part of it was connecting with the school and saying, we want to develop a project with the school to preserve this culture, to educate the children about the importance, to bring in eco-tourists to share and connect from New Zealand, from Australia. And that's been a big part of our mission, is that side of it. So it's more of a cultural, appropriation and respect towards those people. And then my side of it was saying, well, if we're going to bring these products to New Zealand, I want to do the science to further understand how they work. I want to standardize everything so that we can know the therapeutic value of what we're dealing with. I want to create a range of products that work therapeutically, that's measurable, that we can also link to the tradition, so that we have information on tradition but also on science, and we try and fuse the two. And then help people in New Zealand and Australia that need the help that I needed, back before I came to Peru, and kind of give them a bit of that experience that I went through, but from a distance. And then hopefully, we were running retreats too. So we had people that really wanted to connect to come and immerse themselves for 2 to 4 weeks on the farm and be basically taken on a journey through Andean cosmovision, with Maca being centripetal to that whole movement.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so amazing. And I mean, I lived in the Northern Territory for a little bit, so I understand the value of the Indigenous culture and the Indigenous knowledge. And of course, in Australia, everyone sort of knows that, the Indigenous knowledge that we have here has been lost along the way, and the Indigenous people themselves have very little of that traditional knowledge left. And particularly, the traditional owners are now aging, and I know I'm close to a couple of traditional owners up in the in Northern Territory, Northern Western Australia, and they really value passing that cultural knowledge onto the next generation. Otherwise, it's just lost, and there's so much wealth in the products that come out of the land that you're raised in. I mean, I've traveled a lot with my husband, and every place you go to, they have a specific kind of a food that helped them in their journey of life. And for that knowledge to be lost is such a shame.
Yeah,
because there's so much to gain in that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And coming at it from the Western point of view, we see these sacred plants, and it is this very sacred plant for them. And Sally, my partner, says this, like she said that these Indigenous cultures have these plants, and we in the West will come and we will take, we will commercialize it, and we will industrialize it, and we'll bring it to the West, and we'll put maca in every smoothie bar and on the Gold Coast, and people will be drinking their swanky maca smoothies, but there's no connection.
That's what I was doing. See, I was putting it in my smoothies, and I didn't know what it was for.
And they don't even know how that plant has been produced, the energetics behind it, the community that have provided it, the altitude and the geography of where it grows, how it's been hand selected and sun dried, and then how it's been processed, and the love and care and attention, and like all of that is just, and we just see a brown powder in a brown organic looking paper bag, on an organic store, and people go, oh, it's good for hormones, but there's so much more to it. So I suppose as a company, that was really like those were the issues I wanted to address in this market. And working with Sally, I said, look, we need to bring a slice of Peru to home, so that these people can really like understand the importance, and we can do it with reverence towards the Indigenous owners. And that's really because maca doesn't grow everywhere in the world. It's one tiny little kind of plateau of the Andes in Peru. Central Andes is really the only place where this plant grows.
Oh, right. So that's the only place it comes from.
Yeah, that's where it originates out of. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit then about, I've been saying maca, but it's maca. Tell us a little bit about it, so that we have a bit more of an understanding, because it is just, to us here in the West, it's a superfood.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it. And I'd like to, like today, we predominantly want to focus on mental illness, but there's so many other uses for it. And I'd like to have another conversation with you about how it helps with hormones and fertility. But just tell us a little bit about this amazing root. Is it a vegetable?
Yep, yeah, it's a root
Okay,
vegetable. Yeah,
right.
it's from the Brassicaceae family, so it's similar to a radish would
Okay,
be the
right.
closest we have in analogy in the West. It looks a bit like a sort of a turnip or a beetroot. But I'm going to give you two perspectives, so that I'll tell you what I learned in Peru, and then I will talk more about the science of what it means. So the plant only grows around 3.5 to 4,500 meters above sea level. I don't know what is Kosciuszko, your biggest mountain. You're only at around 2,000 odd meters, 2,500 meters.
I'm not the geographist
We,
in the family. That's
in,
my husband's forte.
well, in New Zealand, our highest mountain is called Mount Cook, and that's 3,800. So our farm is higher than that. And I
Right,
mean,
okay.
Mount Cook is incredibly high. So at that altitude, your oxygen levels are half of sea level.
Wow.
And so the first thing you know when you get up there is you're absolutely breathless. It feels like someone is sitting on your chest. You have to, when you take a big breath, you feel your lungs filling up. Now just imagine only getting half of the oxygen of what you're getting.
Yeah.
And this is a unique thing about this plant, is it grows in this altitude for a reason. And the environment it grows is incredibly barren. It is the most kind of difficult climate on the planet, because you get extremes. You get midday, like the UV levels are through the roof because they're so high, the altitudes, the atmosphere is so thin. You can get to 20, 25 degrees during the day with the sun or higher, and overnight can be minus 15.
Wow.
So the extreme conditions really make this environment almost impossible for plants to survive. And yet this plant thrives under those conditions. So the Incan people saw this plant as being very special. There's a big fable about how it was a gift from the gods, and that the seeds of it were found by a Pumpush tribe who were pre-Incan in a cave in a place called San Blas. So we went to San Blas. There's this beautiful cave there, and every year they come back to do to give thanks to Pachamama, the Mother Earth, for providing Maca. And they say that this cave is where the seeds were found, and that they were found in a grave, and that a tribe were guided there to find these seeds by the gods. So they said it was the divinity that caused the Maca to be discovered. So we don't know the date on all of this, but you were talking thousands and thousands of years ago. So they say that this plant can not only survive in this extreme climate, but thrive. And that strength it's a feminine plant, so they call La Maca, meaning her. She thrives under these extreme conditions and builds up this incredible strength and this resilience to stress. And that is your gift when you cultivate her with reverence, with respect. So they believe that Maca is all about building resistance, resilience, strength, fortitude. Anything that can survive in that climate is what you get when you consume it in the right way.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Yeah.
That's what I was told. And when you go there, I mean, we eat a lot of maca because the altitude destroys you. Like, it takes so long to get used to. And it's really good for, those altitude conditions. So what we know about the plant is there's 3 colors, and this is really unique. They all come from the same seed crop. So the root takes a year to grow. So we plant the seeds just before the rainy season, and then it will germinate, cultivate, and then we harvest almost 9 months to 12 months later. So it takes almost a year. They will rip off the rosettes for the best 10% of the crop, and they will replant that root as a gift back to Pachamama.
Wow, back to Earth.
And what Pachamama does is that the root feeds the growth of these giant rosettes, which create the seed capsules. So you actually give 10% back to get your seeds. And if you take seeds from a yellow maca root and you plant it, you don't get yellow maca back. You get all 3 colors back. So if you take red maca and you plant it, you get 3 colors. Black maca, you plant it, you get 3 colors. So you can't make one color. And the color ratios are about 65% yellow, 25% red, 10 to 15% black. So the Sally said she's given you these colors in that ratio for a reason, because these are the ratios that, you know, will determine how we consume it.
Wow,
and there's
that's
always
so fascinating. It's really getting back from Mother Earth, you know, I mean, I'm so big on what the earth gives us, because the earth has got so much power and strength, you know, and even in terms of just energy, just how you ground your energy and all that we're taking into ourselves, and then it helps us to create that balance. But when you're talking about a medicinal crop like that, that's really using food in a way as survival and to nourish yourself and to build who you are. That's really amazing.
And the colors play a unique connection in the body too. So yellow is our equalizer, it is our balancer. It gives us this generic sort of balance, strength, stamina, and endurance. But the red they consider to be the feminine. And red so it's not women, it's feminine energy, meaning it's for internal harmony, for internal balance. It's amazing for inflammatory conditions, for things like your bone density, your blood flow. It helps to nourish and to build and to fuel the body. So it is great for energy as well. And the black is the masculine. So the black is for everything external, stamina, endurance, mental focus. We say muscle and brain. So traditionally, the colors would be consumed differently in a traditional setting. So men would spend more time in the field, so therefore they would be consuming a higher black ratio because they need the energy for farming, for cultivating, for being outdoors. Women traditionally would consume more red because red is also fantastic for hormonal balance and regulation. So the three colors would, you know, have unique benefits within themselves. And what's amazing is they've done some studies recently in Peru to show that only red, for example, works to increase bone density. Yellow and black don't have that.
Wow.
Yeah, red is the one that was the most effective for female fertility in terms of producing healthier ova, increasing rates of conception, improving uterine weight, those types of things. Red was also shown to be the best for reducing perceived levels of anxiety. So really good for the mental health side of things. Black was the one that was the best for memory function. They've done studies on that. And then also black was very prominent for helping with male libido and sexual function. So obviously there's a lot of demand out there in the world for that for men. So black has become like this big thing of all men want black. But what we try and say is that yes, you need some black, but you also need red. And red was fantastic for male prostate function. And again, that sort of anti-inflammatory adrenal cortisol support. And yellow is your balance. So what we did when we created our product ranges, we kind of created blends based on tradition. And we said, what do women more tend to? What do men more tend to? Let's try to customize Maca for what they would want. And then we do generic blends as well with just straight yellow. So yeah, we've looked at the sort of therapeutic side of it, which I think is fascinating. Now getting back to the farming of it, when we harvest that root, like I said before, we lay it under Apu. Apu is the mountain. So there's four energies involved in Maca. There's Pachamama, which is Mother Earth, Mamakia, which is the moon. So that's Quechuan word for the moon. And that is where we do follow the planting and harvesting cycles.
Yeah.
And then Tata Inti is the sun, and the sun is involved predominantly in the drying. The sun drying has to be sun dry. And then Apu is the mountain, the masculine energy. So they're split into feminine and masculine, terrestrial and celestial. So from the earth, above the earth. And these four energetics basically create the spiritual energy of Maca. And we have ceremonies for each of them, and we give reverence to each of them in different aspects of production. So Tata Inti's role, the sun's role, is predominantly through that drying to create the pellets. And what we know when we biochemically map that is that it's the most integral part of production to make our Maca therapeutic. So they knew what they were doing. They figured this out.
That's very powerful. That is, I love that. I just love the whole way. I mean, I will never look at maca again in the same in the same way. It's not just a powder to me now.
Yeah.
But that is brilliant. It's so amazing how they deal with it. Yeah.
And what's amazing as well is the respect for Pachamama. So once we've used that soil for one crop of root and one crop of seed, that soil is rested for 10 years before we will reuse it for maca.
Really?
So they have, basically you need your napu. So you have your apu in the area, your mountain, you plant around and you just rotate your crops in 10-year cycles around apu. And apu feeds the maca through glacial streams and waterways and fertilizes Pachamama, the soil. And then we use apu as well for the climatic conditions to create that drying effect. It's like that time of year is an incredibly dry environment, and that's because the mountains suck all the moisture out of the atmosphere, and then the sun is so intense. So they've figured out, and this is why people say, can you grow maca anywhere in the world? No, you really can't. Like it's like they have a natural environment, a natural laboratory at this altitude.
Yeah, like a whole ecosystem to make it come to life, you know. And no wonder it has so much benefit for mental illness when you talk about it that way, with such a spiritual foundation. It would be so powerful when it comes to mental illness and psychological conditions and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because it builds that connection. It's incredible. So so part of what we do, we follow all those traditions. But as a scientist, I was fascinated by the drying, and what we find when we properly sun dry our maca is that we start to produce these novel molecules. And this class of molecule has been of massive interest over the last 5 to 10 years since its discovery. So they're called macamides. And macamides are named after the plant. They're unique fatty acids that are only found in maca. No other plant on the planet makes them. And they're made post-harvest. So they're not actually in the root. They're in, when the root is processed via traditional methods, that's when they're formed. So the Incan people were biochemists working in an outdoor laboratory to create the incredible class of molecule. There's 19 of them that we've mapped, and our studies here in Wellington are basically mapping and creating a technique to easily identify and characterize different macamides. And then the second part of our study is sort of screening them for biological properties. Which is quite fascinating. So there's 19, and then there's 4 compounds called macaines, which are similar, but they're oxidized forms of the fatty acids. So what's amazing is macamides are not in fresh maca, only in sun-dried maca, and the formation of them is heat activated. So for 2,000 years, they've been boiling these roots to extract them, or macerating them in alcohol and boiling them to extract them. Now, when they took maca out of Peru from the West, these companies, they didn't ask any of these questions, and they just bought it in a raw powder, because everyone wants things raw, and we think raw is better. And people are putting this raw maca in a raw smoothie, and this goes against all the beliefs. And what we now know is doing that could actually be detrimental to your health. Because raw maca is incredibly risky for mold and aflatoxins, which can create all sorts of inflammatory damage in the body. And boiling it protects from that. So we only bring our maca in a pre-heat treated form to protect the gut, to kill off the mold and the aflatoxins. And we know that it doesn't damage the biochemical nature of what's important in that maca.
So you're obviously then working with the shamans of the tribes, or like what? I mean, you would have to know this coming from healers. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a shaman that we do a lot of our ceremonial work with, and they're shamans of Andean cosmovision. So they work with all Andean plants. They work a lot with mama coca, which is the coca leaf, and also a lot of them are linked through Amazonian cosmovision as well, and they work with ayahuasca and San Pedro, and and cacao, and it's all sort of linked, these ideas and philosophies. So a lot of the information we've learned is from our farmer, who has incredible knowledge, but the more of the energetics and that side of it have come through working with local shamans and connecting with shamans who use Maca. We now have an amazing clinic in Cusco, an ayahuasca clinic that is using our Maca as part of their spiritual practice, and their philosophies are all around this concept called Munai, which is a form of meditative practice that the Andean people have used. So it's quite incredible how it's all interlinked in the Andes. There's so much spirituality that's come from this area, and so much of it is being lost as Peru is westernized, but there's still people out there that are really trying to preserve and protect all of these philosophies.
So so from Seleno Health, do you have, I'm fascinated with this whole this whole journey. You were saying earlier that you run retreats and that kind of thing, is that right?
Yeah.
So people can come and stay with you for a little while and sort of live the life and enjoy the medicinal things of these plants.
Yeah, and the purpose is really immersion into the culture. So learn about Andean cosmovision, be part of the ceremony, connect with the sacred plants. And yeah, I mean, it's a spiritual detox. It's changing your environment. And we've had people come, and it's completely, with mental health issues, and it's completely changed the way in which they view everything that they do. So we're really excited, and it was a shame since COVID we haven't been able to run any of our retreats, but we're hoping we can get back next year and continue the work that we've been doing there. And bringing people from overseas in has been amazing for that community too. Like the children from the school now, like they want to farm Maca, they want to share Maca, and before we started working with them, we interviewed a whole load of kids from the school, and none of them wanted to do anything but move to Lima and try and get a job down in the city, and so it's been fascinating to go on that journey. And then my big interest is understanding the biochemistry and looking at the macamides and what they do in the body. Really interesting is that these molecules are actually cannabinoids. So they're plant cannabis. So this is where it gets quite fascinating, is that they're plant cannabinoids similar to what you would find in cannabis as a plant, but they work more indirectly on the endocannabinoid system. So there's so much interest at the moment looking at cannabidiol or CBD. I don't know if you've heard of CBD. This is under that same class, non-psychoactive, so that you're not going to get high off Maca. Indirect cannabinoids that work significantly to boost our natural, cannabinoid production in the brain and the body. And that's one of the big ways in which they're working on a mental health perspective to help with our brain function and our stress systems in the body.
Well, that's so amazing. I need to talk to you more about that. But I wanted to ask you some other things. I wanted to ask you also about the cacao. Do you are you involved much in the cacao and producing cacao and harvesting and what that does and how that helps as well?
And all of that came from our Maca farmer. So the first product we launched was called Chocolate Maca. And this was our farmer's blend. So he had always mixed cacao with Maca. And there's energetic reasons for this. It's not for fun.
Wow.
It's because they're both feminine plants, but your cacao is very yin. It works and opens the heart space. And it's very much about connecting the heart and the brain. And Maca is the ultimate complement to that, because it acts as a root. So it keeps you grounded. And it connects the bottom half to the top half. So cacao is the seed, like in a tree, and the Maca is the root. So the Maca and cacao have been used and traded between the Amazonian and Andean tribes. And in the same region of Peru, you have, there is part Amazon and part mountain. So you have the trade route there where these communities have traded for thousands of years.
Mm.
So our farmer was making chocolate maca. It's a big hit with the kids too. The kids
I
love
can
it.
imagine.
Got a beautiful malt chocolate, caramel chocolate flavor. And our cacao farmer, who he was connected with, was this guy Rolando, who was just an inspiring man who has been working at the forefront of promoting and protecting Peruvian Criollo cacao for the last 30 years. So Peru holds 60% of the world's variety of cacao.
Wow.
So the majority of the incredible varieties in the world come out of Peru. The strain of cacao that is of big interest is called Criollo cacao, which has the finest quality, the finest grade, and the most therapeutic. And it only is 3% of the entire global production. So Peru owns 60% of that 3.
Wow.
So it's a massive player in terms of what they hold in the jungle, and it's a huge area where they're growing cacao. So what happened with Peru is that about 30 years ago, when the drug industry, the cocaine industry took off in Colombia, and Pablo Escobar and all these people were creating cocaine, they contracted cartels in this part of Peru to start growing coca leaf, which is, the coca leaf is how you make cocaine.
Right.
So along with that came a drug war, and came cartels and the drug industry. And, farmers were basically told, you're going to grow coca for us now because we need coca to supply our cartels to export into the US and Europe. And so the whole cacao industry was decimated in Peru, and it went on. There was a war with terrorists in this area, and it was like the most dangerous place on the planet to be. There was bloodshed and violence, and these communities got absolutely destroyed. And it wasn't until about almost 10 years ago that the government said, okay, they wanted to rescue cacao in Peru because of this need for oil and the understanding of how good. So Rolando, the farmer, was a big part of this movement, and the government supported it. So now we're finally getting, farmers able to go back to traditional cacao the way that they've been doing. And and so Rolando had been watching us on social media, like you've been watching us, and seeing what we were doing with Maca. And he said, can you please invite these people? He said to our Maca farmer, please invite them down to my farm. I want to share our story too. And I want them to share our story like they're doing with Maca. So our journey began with Maca, but then having gone to visit his farm, and we were just so blown away by their passion and their excitement. And I was like, oh, now, we have to help them too. Like, we can't just let this slide. So, so the whole cacao program that we started on is only 2 years old. It's quite new. It was just pre-COVID, actually. And and we'd spent some time there. We developed a retreat. So we'd run our first retreat there, working with the community as well, developing these programs for the community like we were doing with Maca, creating some incredible products. And then my role was really, again, biochemically analyzing and looking at how these plants were working in our brain.
So tell me, what is the actual difference? I'm sure it's a question that a lot of people will want answered. What's the difference between natural cacao and cocoa, like the cocoa powder that people get and they use in their cakes, for example? Because I will recommend cacao, but I'm worried people are going to grab the cocoa powder, so we really need to know what the difference is. Can you tell us what that is from your perspective?
And again, it's come about from the westernization of cacao. So the Spanish were the first to change cacao, and when they came to South America, it's a pod. They crack open the pod, and it's a sweet, beautiful fruit, and the seed is the cacao.
Right.
So seeds are incredibly bitter, and the fruit will ferment. So they'll put it in these, we eat the fruit when we're there too. It's a good probiotic, but they put it in these fermentation pods. It starts to create a chocolate aroma. So the fermentation brings out this sort of chocolatey flavor. And then traditionally they would be grinding up the beans, milling them using a volcanic stone rock called a metate. and then they would add hot water. And again, it's all these energetics are connected with it. Sally, my partner, she could talk for hours. We're just launching a cacao education and online program that people can sign up to, and it's fascinating. She talks for hours about all of these beautiful traditions, because her family are not only from the Andes, she has lineage also way back from the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, where they've used cacao. So her teachers for cacao are from Mexico and Peru, and she's been studying under them, which is, yeah. So I'll get back. So they would grind it up and add water and drink this brew or this broth. And that was the traditional way it was used in ceremony. So what they're drinking is full bean cacao. So it's the whole bean that's just been fermented. What the Western people did was they would take that bean and then they would roast it, like we do with coffee.
Right.
And when you roast it, you create a very chocolatey flavor, but you lose all the nuances that go with it. So like with wine, when you've got all these different little flavor compounds, and the pods themselves are porous, so they don't just absorb the energy of the jungle, but they absorb the aroma and the frequency of the jungle. And when we only farm with agroforestry, so under the canopy of the jungle, which is a very, very artisanal way to farm. If we pick a pod next to a papaya tree, our cacao can taste like papaya.
Wow.
Flavor infuse it. And you know, you can taste banana, you can taste oranges, you can taste, we grew some next to some coffee, and it was like eating a mochaccino. It was incredible, the flavor. So when they roasted it, they basically change that biochemical profile, and you destroy a lot of the nutrients, and you just get chocolate flavor. And beyond that, they then figured out how to separate out the fat and the mass. So what they would do is they would separate out the cacao butter, the fat component, the cacao solid, and then they would add in milk solids or some sort of dairy and sugar. And that's how you would make chocolate. So what they had done was completely taken that bean on a different journey to create a confectionery that became, you know, everyone on the planet has had chocolate. And if you've tasted chocolate, you've eaten cacao. So we all already have a connection to cacao.
Yeah.
Whereas what we work with is the pure form of cacao, being that fermented bean that's been sun-dried. So we will either sell it as a whole bean, we'll sell it as a shredded bean, we call it cacao nib, or we will grind it in a mill like they would traditionally do, and allow it to create a thick paste that will harden into blocks or droplets. And we call that cacao paste. And that's the traditional way in which you would use it in a ceremonial setting. And then we also, for people that want, is we separate out the pure fat, and we call that cacao butter. And that has a lot of benefits in food, baking, cosmetics. And then we have the cacao solid, which you can use in your smoothies or your, so yeah, so cocoa is about the heat treated form, and often with additives. So they'll often use emulsifiers or sugar, or they'll, you know, and it's gone through a cooking process. So it's delicious, but not as nutritional, not
as medicinal. So what predominantly would they use cacao for? Like what for what are the main conditions or issues that they would use it?
So traditionally in that setting, cacao was used as part of a range of different, you know, native plants for spiritual development, for journeying, for unlocking. And cacao itself is not a psychoactive plant, but it was often combined with psychoactive plants in some of the temples that in Peru. So there's the Chavin culture, you know, we're using cacao with San Pedro and using it with other plants in combination. But as a daily, like when we talk to the communities there, as a daily sort of tonic and use, they use it for brain function, for happiness, for mental health. And we look at, there's 6 classes of important bioactive molecules that we break down in our cacao, and we look at the levels of each in the different cacao that we use. You know, and it's incredible for the brain, because you've got molecules in there like theobromine, which are uplift the body. They open up the blood vessels, they get blood flow going to the brain, they make you feel energized and uplifted. You've got molecules like they're called N-acetylethylamines, and they're like cannabinoids as well, similar to macamide. So they give you this more sensation of bliss and happiness and balance. And then you've got things like phenylethylamine, which are biogenic amines that work with dopamine to create a feeling of satisfaction. So for people who have an addictive personality and are always searching for dopamine, you can give them a healthy form of dopamine, being phenylethylamine. You've got tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin and gives us a sensation of joy. You've got tryptamine, which helps to create feelings of mindfulness, make us feel more connected, and it's used a lot.
Sorry, is this in the cacao, or this is like over? Yeah, wow, okay. That's fantastic.
So cacao is the most incredible brain food. You know, it can do a lot for our brain. That's amazing. It's a little bit more stimulatory than maca, so we have to, you know, adjust depending on the person and the personality. Like I personally need to go a bit light on cacao, particularly later in the day. If I want to get a good night's sleep, I have to, you know, I use it a lot more on days when I'm active, because I want, you know, it can energize you quite a lot, whereas maca I can use every day.
But if it's got the tryptophan in it and it's triggering the serotonin or raising serotonin levels, wouldn't that help towards producing the melatonin so that they can bring on sleep, or does it depend on the quantities?
It's all about quantities, and also the theobromine in it. It's low caffeine, so our cacao paste only has 30 megs of caffeine, which is like having a green tea. You know, it's not heavily caffeinated, but theobromine you can get up to 250 milligrams in a serve. And for some people, theobromine is a mild stimulant, but it still can have a stimulatory effect. So this is why we say, you know, like it's that balance, and you've got to figure out how it works for you and your body. So it's good to, if you're going to start to use like a proper, you know, ceremonial cacao, like be sure that, you know, you start with small amounts, start with during the day, see how your body reacts and responds. And if you feel like you can have it before bed, some people can, you know, have it and they sleep like a baby, then all good.
I wanted to actually talk to you a little bit more about the quantities and the ratios, but we're just running out of time. Maybe you can give me that information later on, like just give me some quantities, because I think, you know, when predominantly my people I deal with are families with children who have got ADHD or behavioral issues. So we've got a real sort of, you know, imbalance in all those neurotransmitters. I think this product would be a great natural option for them. But particularly for people who don't really want to go down the path of medicines. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about ratios and how I would prescribe, or how people should be taking it so that it's not having an adverse effect on them as well. So maybe you can give that to me later and I can pass it on to people who would want to know. Yeah,
I mean, it's, you know, it's with maca, it's really about, there are quite a few options on our website, so it's about sort of researching what best aligns. I think for most children though, we've just like the straight yellow maca or the chocolate maca is a great starter, because it's pretty well tolerated. Like it's only in more sort of severe cases where we look at using the colors and using the concentrated forms of the colors, which we also sell. That's more, you know, I mean, for adolescents and adults dealing with anxiety and depression, that's when we go to concentrated forms. So for children, unless it's a severe case, then just starting on a generic maca, you know, one teaspoon to 2 teaspoons a day is a really great start. But I mean, if people want advice, they can contact us, or you know, we can share some more info on dosing.
That'd be great. And they just have it, do you have recipes you could share with them as well?
We have a 20-page recipe book, because I know the hardest thing when you go on Maca is trying to figure out what do I do with it.
Yeah.
And particularly with kids, it can be hard to hide it in their food. So yeah, we have some great recipes that we can supply a recipe book on PDF form.
Excellent.
You know, we cook it in porridges in the morning. We have it in smoothies. We put it in pancake mixes. The chocolate one, you know, we do little hot chocolate things in the morning. In summertime, we go more for sort of chocolate milkshakey, like plant-based milkshake things.
Okay.
There's
Excellent.
a lot. Yeah.
All right. So just I'm coming to the end of my Zoom session. So basically, I just wanted to firstly, how do people get access to your product?
Yeah.
So that, if someone, because I'm sure people are going to be really keen now to get straight from the farm. So how can we get access to your product?
Well, we have two bases. So we have a base on the Gold Coast, and that's all run by my brother who lives there, and our amazing Peruvian friend Nico, who's our representative for Australia. So if you go to selenohealth.com.au, that's our Australian website, and you can order all the products there. We do have a range of local stockists that you can see on their website. We're only a year older in Australia, so that list is growing, but it's small at the moment. So, you know, if you know of any local stores, please get them onto us.
And New Zealand, a lot of my group members also from New Zealand. So
so in New Zealand, we're on selenohealth.com. So the same, but .com, not .com.au. And we sell online, nationwide. And then we have in New Zealand about 130 stockists. So you can see the stockist list on our website. There's so much info on selenohealth.com about, you know, the articles on Maca, like the colors explained, you know, like understanding the frequently asked questions, you know, how Maca works, all of that stuff is on there. And also if you're in two minds as to what Maca is right for you, we do free consults too. So you can actually, through the shop, you get a free 10 to 15 minute consult. We can talk specifically about, you know, which Maca we would advise you to get if you're interested.
Excellent.
So you don't have to worry.
Because I would feel a little bit lost if I was to, you know, go down that path and it's like, where do I start? So that's fantastic. I'm glad that you've got the support there as well. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, Dr. Corin Storkey. I'm so happy that you agree. I mean, I've been, you know, like I said, I've been following you for years, and this is definitely down our alleyway treating. You know, my focus is to treat mental illness, particularly children with behavioural issues that just keep getting these diagnoses, and, you know, there's something that can be done. It doesn't have to be a life sentence. It's something that can be worked on naturally with natural resources. And your product is absolutely one of those products that can help support in that way.
Yeah, we've had some incredible results, like with kids, and, you know, like even recently we had a mum come up and said, look, the doctor was recommending Ritalin for my child, and I've tried them on Maca and it's just been phenomenal, like the behavioral changes and improvements. So there's definitely, for a lot of people, there are alternatives that I would say you can look at before going that route. And even if you are on medication, it's complementary as well. There's no contraindications to using Maca with any of these types of drugs. So
Excellent, because there are people that, you know, they do make that decision. Everyone's got their reasons in the decisions they make, and my aim is to support people, whether they go down the path of medication or whether they don't want the medication, and what the options are. So the fact that they can also be supported that way is great.
Yeah, and I mean, I started on Maca when I was on antidepressants, and I still felt benefit from it. So, you know, even if you want to stay on your medication, it's something that can help improve how you feel on that medication. So don't be worried. Like it's definitely supportive.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll get to do another session on a different topic. I really want to talk to you about fertility and hormones and all that kind of thing. but we'll be in touch, and I'll continue to follow you. And thank you once again. So anyone who is interested in trying the product, Seleno Health, that's the selenohealth.com for New Zealanders, selenohealth.com.au for Australians.
Yep.
Thank you so much again, and good luck and congratulations for your marriage.
Yeah, excited. It's coming up on Saturday, and yeah, I've got to go do some more planning now.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks for taking this time to talk to us in your busy schedule. Anyway, thank you so much.
Okay.
All
Awesome.
right, take
Thanks.
care.
Yeah.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.